At what point did folk and acoustic music become a point of interest to you?
Let's see. I was raised on my parents' folk collection, so that was and the idea of doing acoustic music professionally, I think, was sort of a naive idea, because I didn't really realize that the folk movement was still going sort of underground here in the States. But I grew up listening to Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Simon and Garfunkel, and everybody in my parents' record collection, and then I got that back into my life sort of in my when I was a teenager and in college. So then I became, and then I wanted to become a playwright. And in the back of my mind, I always wished that I could be a folk singer just like Joan Baez and Judy Collins had been, never realizing that the 30-year cycle was going on, and that by the time I really decided to pursue folk music, the movement would be ready to take me in and help me make this a career, because folk music has become a very strong sub-genre of music in the United States. So that's kind of my acoustical career. Looking back, what do you think it was about that music form that really grabbed you? Well, I think when I was young, it's a terrific music to be a family to, because a lot of it is arranged very orchestrally. It's very beautiful music, and the stuff from the 60s and Cat Stevens and stuff. And there's enough there are enough themes of life and death and meaning and things are all about, that it creates a sort of a reflective environment. We used to play cards and do puzzles and things listening to all this folk music. And then when I got older, I started listening to the lyrics in earnest, and and that's when I started hearing all the words of Leonard Cohen and Simon and Garfunkel and all the people, even Brecht Weil, who Judy Collins was interpreting on one of her albums, and all of the poetry and the intensity of it came to me. And when I was around 16, I just thought, this is amazing music, because this is the music that turns the wheel of our culture and of our world. This is the music that's trying to define us as we are happening historically. So I always thought this was the most important music somebody could make. Was there a point in time where you felt you really began to develop a confidence in your own songwriting ability, in particular with regard to presenting it to a live audience? I had a couple of breakthroughs. One of them was around a kitchen table with some friends, where I had written some traditional Irish songs. I had started writing songs in other people's genres, sort of imitations of things, and then I had written one song that was a lot more personal, and I thought was a bit whiny, and I played it for my friends, and they said, we like that one the best. We don't think it's whiny. We think it's you, and it's your poetry, it's your voice. And so I started experimenting with that. Then I started going to open mics and things, and somewhere around in sort of my second or third year of being out trying to perform in front of people at cafes and things, I was playing at a very small club, and I'd had a hard day, and I decided to just to let it go, and I just started telling jokes on the stage and just bringing more of myself up on stage, and it was a huge breakthrough. It was a really big performing breakthrough to realize that the reason things hadn't been going well with audiences before wasn't that I was bringing too much of myself, it was that I was bringing not enough of my real self onto the stage. So once I started kind of appearing warts and all, as we say, it was my relationship with the audience started to form, and that's made a lot of difference to me in terms of the trust I feel about the audience and myself when I'm up on a stage. So were you feeling a little self-conscious about being too personal, even in your lyrics and everything as well, in those stages? No, that's turned out not to be a problem. It just seems like once you bring something to a stage, it enters the public domain in a certain way. And there's just things that you do but that don't feel right, and that have a sort of, the stage has its own taboos attached to it. So, if your mother or father just had a sensitive operation in the hospital, you don't talk about it, and you probably don't sing about it unless you veil it in such a way that people won't think that you're sort of showing too much of the soft underbelly of your family. On the other hand, you can bring up a lot of vulnerability and a lot of vulnerable things on the stage, because this is one of the safest places to explore very personal stuff. It's not like for me, it's not like somebody from the audience is going to run up and start giving me, a consoling hug, which I hate. I can be very dramatic and very honest without feeling that like my space will be intruded upon. And the audience is sitting out there in the dark, and they're allowed to be anonymous as they have this paradoxically very universal experience. So I think it's what I've learned is that the power of the stage really holds up with vulnerable material.
I believe in your college days you studied religion, is that right?
Yeah.
Were you writing songs at that time?
I was writing a few. I was a religion and theater major, so I was just sort of enthralled with sort of where those two cross paths at various places.
Were your religious studies influencing your songwriting at all at that stage?
I would say that, I would say the theater was affecting the way I was creating narrative and pursuing narrative, and theater was, and religion was affecting the content. I was a really lousy religion major. It's not like I did that well on my papers or anything, but, I loved the stories, and I loved how people told and reinterpreted them, and I really got that. So it really affected the way I, how I would try to pick up a story and retell it myself.
I believe there were a couple of early cassette-only releases that you had out. Is there any chance of those officially seeing the light of day?
No, they've only slightly seen the light of day. There's a really nice kid a guy who tapes them for people if they make a small donation to this land preservation trust we have. So if you make this small donation, he tapes it for you and sends it out. So it's in the world, it's available, but I mean, that's as high tech as I would like to make it.
Yeah.
I don't think that, it's really hard for me. I haven't heard them in about 7 years.
There's definitely been a groundswell of interest in women singer-songwriters in recent years. Can you put that down to any particular reason?
I always put it down to something that I think kind of makes people squirm, which is I think women have money now. So you see a proliferation of songwriters and filmmakers and book writers. Well, I guess women have always been the greater market for buying books, but there's movies where women end up as the heroes, and women are more complex, and I think songs are starting to have the same variety. And as women's experiences start to be legitimized by the market, they are able to, if a woman's the breadwinner in the house and she wants to see something like The Truth About Cats and Dogs instead of seeing Armageddon, she could she could pull her boyfriend along to her movie instead of always being dragged along to his movies. And I think the same is true with music. And lo and behold, this is music that men like too. I mean, I don't think it's music only for women. So as the range of stories, plus, women are getting enough of a foothold financially that they're able to create music and oftentimes create it themselves without the help of a major label entity, telling them how they should be presenting themselves to the world. So they can define their stories more organically, and women who have money to buy that can choose the more organic stories, and sure enough, the major label entities and the major studios sit up and say, my gosh, this is a whole world that we've been neglecting. How can we foster this and keep this going? And suddenly it's huge. So that's I think there's an economic base to this. Plus men are more receptive to women's stories now. So that's a social thing that I think has happened.
Yeah, that's a good point. How about comparisons to other singer-songwriters? When a music critic draws parallels between yourself and another female singer-songwriter, does that sit okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. It's always interesting to hear what they say, and nobody says the same thing. So I think any woman who finds herself being compared to Joni Mitchell just considers that to be lazy journalism. That's the only thing that one can say, that Joni Mitchell is absolutely the godmother of for all of us, because she brought such a chromatic scale to her music, and she brought such a stream of consciousness to her folk music, as it was called. So that, of course, has been a huge influence, and all of us have been touched by that. But I've been compared to Chrissie Hynde and Natalie Merchant, and I mean, just outrageous comparisons. And really, the people I sound like the most in terms of phrasing and stuff are men, and no one's ever guessed that.
Now, you mentioned Joan Baez earlier. You were fortunate enough to tour extensively with her, I believe, not too long ago.
Huge. Yeah. How
receptive was her audience to you, and what things did you take away from a tour like that in terms of things learnt?
Well, it was an enormous thing. I mean, it was a synergy of our audiences. So we were able to. It was good for both of us. It was obviously much better for me. It was a really big deal for me. But the fact that Joan was taking this risk was so popular with my audience, and my audience was growing. And so a lot of people, she was just seen as a person who's still out there trying to find new songwriters that the world doesn't really know about. And, as she did with Bob Dylan, and trying to interpret their songs and help them do what they do best. And she gave me so much latitude. Sometimes she gave me a little tip about what I could do to sing better, tuck my butt in and pull my stomach in sometimes. But it was always very gentle. It was always very accessible, and it wasn't sort of this huge concept that she'd drop on me just before I went on stage. And so she was a because she's a performer, she knew exactly when and how to offer a few suggestions, and her grace affected me as much as any suggestion that she made. I mean, how she was with people and with me, I think, has affected me the most, because she's genuinely gracious and very, very funny, and is not gracious when someone really messes with a boundary that's ridiculous. She's very good at pulling herself up and saying, this isn't, this is not, this sound check has been going on long enough. What's really going on? And then somebody runs and, says, actually, I've been wondering if this wire has been out, and they put it together, and suddenly things go forward. She's very good at just saying, okay, where are we going? But she's also good at finessing and being very sensitive to people at knowing their vulnerabilities and helping them along. I saw her doing that with me and with other people that she works with.
And she covered one of your songs, didn't she?
She's covered, actually, at this point, she's covered three, which is a huge honor. I mean, and if you're living in legend time, which you can't really afford to do as a performer, this is just, this is quite a fairy tale that I'm a part of. But if you're living in actual time, you just sort of have to say, yes, this is quite incredible, and every once in a while I just stop and realize what dreams have come true, but I still have to get on with sound check, performance, getting lunch and things like that.
Now, each of your albums to date has progressively gone towards a fuller sound.
Yeah.
Has that been because you felt the songs have specifically warranted that more so than in the past?
Yeah, it did seem, as I was writing them, we learned something on my second album, which was that there was a song that was sort of a pop song, and we kept, we were, of course, horrified, and so we tried to put mandolins and things on it that would kind of give it a more earthy feeling, and then it just didn't work. So we turned it into a pop song, and it worked. And so it seemed like the thing to do, the thing that was most efficient environmentally, financially, and emotionally was, if you wrote a pop song, you produce it like a pop song. If you don't write a pop song, you don't, and I think that will affect all of my albums from now on, that I will that I'll go all out if needs be. I don't know how I feel about drum loops. I don't know how I feel about simulated drum things. But other than that, if it's something that needs full production, I don't think I'll pull punches, because that wastes time.
So you can envisage continuing that direction with your next album?
I can, but at the same time, there was a lot of stuff on the most recent album that was really spare.
Yeah.
And I said, do you think the contrast will be a problem? And the producer and Steve and I both said, well, if it is, then it is. This song doesn't need more than a little electric guitar swell here and there and a basic acoustic presentation.
So has that happened often over the 3 albums, that you've found that the finished product has varied much from what your original intentions may have been?
No, actually, the albums have. No, if anything, the albums have reinforced what I had suspected when I was writing the songs. On my first album, I wrote a song called Alleluia, and I remember it was a percussive guitar thing, and I was doing some damping and some new things for me, which are pretty simple guitar techniques. But I thought, oh gosh, they're gonna hate me for this. This is a rock song. This is not what I've done before, and it was so completely embraced. And we did a rock production of it, and it was appropriate to the song, and it was as fully embraced as songs about my babysitter and nuclear testing, and so I think when you write a song, you say, well, this is the song that wants to get written right now, and I'm assuming that it's going to have a pretty full production. And then you do the full production, and you find out from audiences that that's not a problem, if you're true to the song, you're not going to disappoint anybody.
So there was that little feeling of tentativeness there in the studio, the worry that some of your older fans may not, I guess, accept what direction you're heading in?
Yeah, and actually, there's one sort of cynicism that an audience can have that I think is a good idea, which is sometimes you hear things and it just sounds like a person's trying too hard to get radio play,
Yeah.
They're producing things in such a way that they could just, and they've put production values over content, and you don't hear the content, but you do hear the manipulation, and people listen for that, and I think question the artistry, and I think that's an appropriate question, and I question that too. But I think, all of the stuff that we did as rock songs were about completely non-commercial topics, so it's not like I couldn't have been shooting for that goal too much. If you don't write a song about therapy and expect it to top the charts, especially a really goofy song about therapy, which is the one I wrote.
How do you like the studio? Do you enjoy the environment?
Oh, I hate it. I have to get the New York Times and a book of short stories and all these things so I can, we have this word codependent here in the United States that we use all the time, and it means that you feel overly identify with everybody around you. And when I see the producer out there with furrowed brow, working on the knobs, and after a take, I just think, oh, I've just made his life hell, because I've just, I did such a bad take, and it was so flat and sharp, and he's just figuring out how to cut and snip it so that it's not a complete failure, and that's not true. He's just doing his thing. So I try to read the paper and read stories and look at things that will calm me down so I can just sort of be in the spirit of the song. And I always learn a lot about what's happening with my voice, because you've got these headphones blaring in your ears, and there's no lying. So it's incredibly good to go into the studio, but I have a really hard time. I work with people who can really humor me.
Yeah, and I bet you're glad to get out of there when it's all over.
Yeah, I am. I think everybody is, to some extent.
Do you have a best time for writing, a time that suits you best?
No, it's really erratic. Usually, the only thing that works for me is when I feel inspired, and it's just really hard to say when I feel inspired. Sometimes I was in some pattern where I would take myself to a bad movie once a week, a good movie in my opinion, but one of these sort of schlocky romance films that Americans are so good at making, and I would sit down after, I would come home and somehow just be so caught up in the sort of schmaltziness of the film that I wouldn't be judging my writing, and something inside me would feel free enough to experiment and not be censored. So there does seem to be some balance between the discipline of sitting down and writing, but also the freeness and whimsy of feeling free to do what you want without some voice in your head saying, well, that's the stupidest thing you've ever done. And that can be any time of day.
You tour a lot. Do you find the time, can you write when you're on the road, or do you find that difficult?
Well, again, I think it's just whenever I feel plugged in.
Yeah.
Whenever I feel inspired, I'm able to do that. And I haven't found the perfect Petri dish environment for me to just, create the environment that will create the best songs. Sometimes it's in a hotel room, sometimes it's at a sound check, and sometimes I need to be home for a week decompressing from something to just get started.
What particular quality or aspect of your songwriting do you find most important to try and perfect when you're writing a song?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
What aspect of your songwriting is most important to you to get just right when you are getting a song down?
The words.
Definitely the lyrics, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's what's nice. I'm working with Richard Schindel and Lucy Kaplansky, who are two great singer-songwriters here, and we've sort of teamed up to do this thing called Cry, 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 and we're covering other people's songs. And something I always envied Richard for was that he's so enthralled and in love with music and with various songs. He's the kind of person who grabs you by the arm and says, listen to this and listen to that line. And oftentimes it's lyrics, but a lot of times the lyrics are simple. And what he's really grooving to is the melody, the marriage of melody and lyric. And I wrote a song recently that I played for him, and I had alternative melody lines. And he said, that one flows, and that line doesn't flow. So I would definitely stick with, the A choice. And that's when I realized that there are definitely lines that really sing, and then there are lines that kind of get clogged up melodically, and that are just as important as how lyrics flow. And so I like the idea that I'm going to go forward with a little bit more grace in terms of melody writing. But the words, I love to worry about the words.
Now, you do have an extremely devoted core of fans, and I guess for someone like yourself still in the relatively early stages of a recording career, do you find that you must find that gives you great confidence and a spur to try new things?
It's been, you can see it as a drawback, but it's important to know that audiences are often intelligent enough to grow with you when you grow. And I think that's how you get away from the sort of the fear that if you do something new, the audiences won't like you anymore. If there's more people there's more people to turn against you for an experimental decision. But once you've had a few experiments with testing the waters with an audience and watch them rise to the occasion, and even come up to you after a show and say, I'm so, this is a whole new part of you, and I was hoping that you would do a song like that.
Yeah.
You're able to go forward and say, I might lose a few people, but I could also really gain a few people for just following my muse. And if you're superstitious, as I am, you don't want to anger your muse. So it's really great to know that an audience will respect you if you say that to them.
Yeah.
If you say, I had to write this thing on a out-of-tune piano and play it for you like this, they'll go with you.
Now, unfortunately, I was out of town last year when you were here, so I missed you. Are there any thoughts to another Australian visit? Any plans?
Well, I wasn't sure at first, but I'm in a transition now between two managers. I worked with one for 5 years, and our contract came due, and I was looking around, and there's someone who I really wanted to work with, and I spoke to him and said, I said, this is what I do, this is what I do, and he said, well, it sounds great to me. What I love the most about the people that I work with are their international careers. And I just thought, oh no, all the jet lag and the strange food and the, the culture shock and the audiences that you don't know if they know your language, and I thought, oh gosh, I've been kind of hoping that I could stay a little more domestic, and And when he said that, I realized that if I wanted to work with him, that this was something that I would have to do. And actually, I spoke to Jackson Browne's manager, who said that he had some transition, sort of culture shock into coming into playing in Europe and stuff, and had sort of similar questions that I did about playing in foreign countries and what translates culturally and what doesn't. And once you just trust that happens, that cultural translation happens, and that you can find the common ground. International touring is amazing. It's fun and exciting, and it gives you all sorts of things you didn't expect. But you gotta go with an open mind and no expectation. And so it looks like I'm in for the long ride. Sounds like I'll be there within the year.
Oh, terrific. Well, that's fantastic. We'll look forward to that. What else is on your books for 99?
We're going to finish out Cry, 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 actually. I'll probably take some time off in the fall just to make sure that I'm all set to release this album. And then I guess we will release it all over the place in 2000. The people who've been putting out my label's albums in Australia are Shock Records, and they're great. Actually, that's one of the best international relationships we have with my American label. So Australia would probably be one of the first places I would come.
Oh, fantastic. That's great to hear. Okay, Dar, look, I won't hold you up any longer. Thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on 3 wonderful albums to date.
Well, thank you very much.
We look forward to the rest.
Yeah, me too.
And hopefully an Australian visit within 12 months. That'd be great.
Exactly. We'll shoot for that. Okay. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.